Made some very big, accurate calls in the past. Earlier, I asked him where he thinks the global economy and markets will be 1 year from now.
I think within 1 year, the Chinese economy will perform poorly. In other words, that will have a recession.
A recession in China?
Yes. Whereby, you know, a recession in China could be a technical recession if you go and slow down from a growth rate of, say, 10% to a growth rate of 3%. There is a recession.
Right.
And also, I don't believe in the growth figures that China publishes, because if you had adjusted nominal GDP for the true rate of inflation, then real growth is, of course, much slower. But, you know, I want to tell you something that disturbs me in all emerging economies and in many other developed economies. For my taste, in front of luxury hotels, there are far too many Ferraris, Maseratis, Bentleys.
Sign of the peak,
that is
or
not
what?
a good sign. You know, you should see depression when conditions are depressed. I see a boom everywhere.
A boom everywhere.
Yeah, except for the working class and except for the lower middle class. But among the well-to-do people, the wealth that is floating around and the prices you pay for high-end properties is incredible. And I think that will come to an end, and a lot of people will lose a lot of money. And so I'm ultra careful at the present time.
You know, it's interesting in your report, you talk about, I'm going to read right from it, Americans have been watching protests against oppressive regimes that concentrate massive wealth in the hands of an elite few, yet in our own democracy, 1% of the people take nearly a quarter of the nation's income, and in inequality, even the wealthy will come to regret. So you're saying we're watching everything that's happening in the Middle East, yet it's right here.
Yeah, I was the other day in La Jolla and Newport Beach, Laguna Beach, and you see, I mean, I was in front of a restaurant smoking. I've never seen so many Ferraris and Maseratis and Bentleys and, you know, fancy cars anywhere in the world.
Right.
And this is in America. I'm not saying this is wrong. I'm not here a social observer. I'm just saying, basically, there is such as we have today. And let me explain to you what I mean by that. Mr. Gregory Mankiw, of course an economist at Harvard, but he represents very well the views of the Federal Reserve, in particular the views of Miss Janet Yellen, who is now the vice chairman at the Fed. He says, and he wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal a year ago, the problem is that people are saving money instead of spending it. And we have to get these bastards to spend it again and to...
Huge rally from around the low was at 1522 last December, and we're now over 1700, and I think we need a correction here. In fact, I am now bearish about practically all assets near term. I think we're entering a correction time where there will be some disappointment, where stock markets from the recent highs can easily drop 20%.
That's really an interesting comment that you just made, and I want you to expand upon it a little bit and then kind of explain what you mean. You say you're bearish on nearly all assets in the near term. First of all, what's the near term? And then how does this develop, and when does that change? So obviously now you just sit in cash, I would think, is what you're saying. But
well, I'm not 100% in cash for the simple reason that I could be wrong. But in general, I think that people that have a heavy exposure to assets, being that equities or gold or other commodities, I think they will face some profit-taking here.
Right. And 100% chance that the U.S. enters another recession. Again, an issue and a question of timing and how that develops. What do you say?
Well, I think that some people in the U.S., actually the ECRI, already say that the U.S. is in recession. But, of course, we have to consider the following. An economy is a very large vessel. There are different sectors. And some sectors are improving, like housing in the U.S. is improving.
Right.
The problem with the improvement in housing is that stocks have already gone up very substantially.
With the collapse of our capitalistic system as we know it today, wars, massive government debt defaults, and the impoverishment of large segments of Western society. That's according to our guest today, Marc Faber. He's the editor of the Gloom, Boom, and Doom Report. So there's the gloom and the doom.
Yes.
Marc,
Yes.
what are you so concerned about?
Well, I think that in the Western world we have essentially standards of living that won't go up, and government debt is rising everywhere. We have stimulus packages, we have central banks that basically will print money, not just here in the United States. They have no other option than to keep the system going. And I believe we have now governments, and especially here in the United States, the stimulus today is a fiscal deficit of around $2 trillion. I don't think it will go down. It will go up, in my opinion. Number two, we have a money printer at the Fed, and he will print money and keep interest rates at zero, basically. And when one day interest rates should go up, he'll keep them below the rate of inflation, as Mr. Greenspan and he did after 2001, when interest rates were continuously below the cost of living increases.
Well, I think to Henry's point, there's a difference, though, between a sluggish recovery or even the 1970s-style stagflation and the end of capitalism as we know it.
Yes,
what's going to be the trigger?
Well,
you're talking about economic Armageddon here.
Yes, absolutely. That I'm convinced. And that is, I mean, a high-confidence prediction that the total collapse will come. And I'll explain how. But one day they notice that the standards of living really go down, and that the employment situation hasn't improved much. I don't think that employment will improve very much. It may stabilize but not improve much. And then to divert the attention from the public, the governments then go to war. And we have already 2 wars. And Afghanistan, I guarantee you, is a barrel without a bottom, bottomless pit.
All right, so 2 questions. One, is this going to be a military coup? What is it like when capitalism collapses? What happens?
Well, when it collapses,